All right, let's dive right in. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ben Conway. I'm the co-founder and COO of Ventana. And today we're going to be talking about maximizing your 3D investment through selling on B2B, e-commerce, Metaverse, NFTs, and beyond. So for a little background on Ventana, for those of you who don't know, we describe ourselves as a 3D infrastructure platform. And so what that means is that we can add 3D capabilities throughout the entire life cycle of your product, from initial design and back and forth between 2D and 3D designers, to development, to internal reviews, assortment planning, all the way through to go-to-market, which is where we're going to focus today. And the way that we're able to enable this technology across the entire product lifecycle is through our patented optimization algorithms, which can reduce 3D file sizes by up to 99% while still maintaining super high visual fidelity. So this allows users to load really light, really quick models on desktop, mobile, AR, digital showrooms, all sorts of different places. So that'll be kind of the last plug on us for this. Happy to answer any questions about us or anything I talk about later on. But let's dive into some housekeeping. So we will be sending a recording and slides of today's webinar. Afterwards, feel free to share that internally or with a friend if you think it'll be useful. Any questions you have, we'll be addressing those at the end, unless Richard bumps me and says this is super important. And Richard's our head of marketing who's on the call right now and says we need to answer right now. We'll answer all those at the end. And if you need any assistance with Zoom, just use the chat function and Richard would be more than happy to help. All right. So the agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about some basic considerations for 3D selling. So I want to talk about how can you ensure that you're going to be successful when you're selling using 3D, and what do you need to do to make sure that you're actually able to scale it? Because I think that's a super overlooked part of selling in 3D. Then we're going to go over B2B sales and how you can use this in a B2B context. And that's probably where we're actually going to spend the most amount of time today, because that's where we're seeing our customers get the most value out of 3D today. Next, we'll dive into e-commerce. And then finally, we'll get into NFTs and Metaverse experiences. So some basic considerations for 3D selling. Diagram your end-to-end workflow early on. I cannot stress how important this is and how often it's overlooked. A lot of times the way that we're seeing 3D come down is through an eComm team or a marketing team's like, we want to try this thing in 3D. And we highly recommend testing and trying things out. We're totally okay with that. But the issue is people put the cart before the horse and they miss out on all of these gaps that might exist. So they start setting up processes that are only going to be effective for a single channel. And that can be really, really problematic. So I think it's very helpful to go from even starting at the raw material stage. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Like, okay, we've got our raw materials. We're going to scan those raw materials. Then we've got back and forth between our designers. Like I'm talking about the entire thing that happens all the way before you actually get into go-to-market, which is the last phase of the product lifecycle. So diagramming that will help identify any gaps, any current processes that might be lacking. Oh, wait, this doesn't scale. Oh, wait, this person needs a different sort of file format. Do we have all the data from PLM associated with this 3D asset to put somewhere else? There are lots of questions that come up when you're diagramming this. This also helps you see like, all right, we're going to be using VibeIQ, and then we're going to be using Jor for wholesale, and then we're going to use it on eComm, and then also someone from Meta reached out to us, and we want to test this on Instagram, or we want to test it on Snapchat. What you're going to realize is that when you dig into that a little bit more, there's different specifications that are required for each step of the process. And so more than just like, oh, this might change everything, it might make you quickly realize we might have to bite this off in smaller chunks. And let's try it here, and then we can try it there. So I highly recommend diagramming your end-to-end workflow before you even start looking into selling 3D. That's something we can help you with. That's something other partners like Calypso can help you with, but I think it's immensely important as you're looking to scale up. The next thing that is really important is, what does success look like? We have been a part of multiple tests in the past where there were different ideas of what success looked like. Oftentimes you got your digital product creation team that's involved in the process, and they might have a certain idea of like, I think this would be successful. This is so cool. We created this in 3D. It's live on e-commerce. Isn't this amazing? And then you've got your e-commerce team that's like, Well, we're really focused on increasing conversions, or we really want to drive higher engagement if it's maybe a luxury product because you don't get that many conversions on e-commerce. Like whatever that is, you need to make sure that both of the teams are aligned, and then you need to make sure you have all of the proper tracking mechanisms in place. Is that data linked up? Are we able to track through our site the conversion rates? Is the partner we're working with able to give us the data that we want out of this? How are we going to gauge success for this? And then do we even have the tools to do that? And I know some of this stuff seems really basic, but I've been a part of enough pilots at this point where that hasn't actually happened, that I think it's very worthwhile to point out. So those are all things that you should be thinking about before you actually even dive into selling in 3D. The next thing that you should be thinking about is, okay, we've diagrammed where we want to sell it. We know these channels. We know what we want to track. Now we need to think a little bit more about like, what are the raw inputs we need to get there? So one of the limitations that might come up is a lot of the avenues when you're talking about 3D selling, I'm talking about real-time 3D. I'm talking about an interactive 3D model. I'm not talking about renders like this render that I've got on the side of the screen. I'm talking about real-time interactive 3D. And there's some limitations around that. If you are someone who sells fur, who's got fur on products, that's not going to work in real-time applications right now. If you've got lots of velvet, lots of Sherpa, that's going to be a problem. Displacement maps, let's save. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but it is something you need to take a little bit more consideration in when you're using it. I know a lot of knits use displacement maps in their 3D models, but all of these things that are things that you should think about, because what'll happen is, and we've seen this again happen, is like, okay, we're ready to do 3D and they've got scans of boots, for instance, and the boots have fur, and the reality, they just don't look good. They don't look the way that they should. But the problem is they already got the eComm team to sign off on this test, and they hadn't really thought about the fact that, oh, this is actually going in a real-time environment. And so now it's not going to look the way that it should or won't work at all. So that's really important to think about. What product are we going to try and test out? There are new, they call them extensions for GLTF. There are new capabilities, let's say, for real-time rendering for these different types of materials that are coming out all the time, but it's something you should think about before you get started. Another thing you need to think about is the different platforms are going to have different specs. It is not a one-size-fits-all by any means. Snapchat's cool with 2K textures. Meta wants 1K textures. Some people are fine with your export from Browseware, where you've got a single material per UV, or a single UV per pattern piece, basically. Others are like, no, this all needs to be in a 0 to 1 UV space. And so those are all things that you need to think about before you go into selling in 3D. And again, they're all things that are very doable, but they need to be thought about, because what'll happen is you might prep a bunch of files with the idea that you're going to be able to use them in all these different places. But if you don't gather those specifications ahead of time, it's going to cause a lot of problems and a lot of headache for you. POCs and implementations fail when not properly planned or tested. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about, do we have the analytics in place? Do both teams know what they want to test? And then did we pick the right product to test? Something else to note is just generally, a 3D viewer doesn't cut it. Just because you have a 3D model and you have a 3D viewer, to think that you're doing a proper test is really not accurate. That'd be akin to saying, we're going to upload a video and we're going to use the raw video that we had. The video is 500 megabytes large. We'll just let people load it on our eComm site. You would never do that. You're going to optimize all of your images. You're going to optimize all of your video files before they ever go live in a consumer-facing or buyer-facing role. The same is going to be true of 3D. Reducing file size, making sure that the textures are performant, which isn't just around file size. You want to make sure that the model's actually performant. So we'll work on a lot of devices. So not just the latest iPhone, not just the latest Google Pixel. That's always going to be an important consideration. And this is something I added right before this webinar, this last point, because I was just on a call with a client talking about it. And I think it's really, really important. And I think that people don't think about it enough, is how important your material libraries are to get right early on in the process. If you do not standardize your material libraries, if you do not think that about all of the places that this file might ultimately live, if you are only focused on renders, you are going to be kicking yourself later on. And the reason is, you're going to have to go back and rework the materials, or you're going to have to rework them within the program, or you're going to export them and then rework that 3D model to adjust the materials to get it ready. If you standardize ahead of time, and when I say standardize, what I mean is, as much as is possible without materials like fur, you want to make sure that your materials follow PBR spec for GLTF. You can write this down. I'll maybe include it in the email that we send out, Richard, as a note for the recap. PBR spec using the metallic roughness workflow. Those materials will be ready to go for pretty much anywhere that you want to use them, and they'll still look great for renders. It's not like going to take anything away from your rendering capabilities. Oftentimes, if you can get your materials in PBR spec with metallic roughness workflows, you will be set up for success when it comes to selling 3D down the road. Adobe Substance Sampler, we don't have any relationship with them. I'm just letting you know it's an amazing tool. Take a look at it. We're recommending it to clients. It can really enhance your materials and will help you with that standardization process, including scans, including existing scans that you have. All right. This is now live on our website. We might make a few adjustments to this based on some feedback, but the reason that I'm sharing this, and it was included in the deck, is like, I want you to be thinking about all the places that 3D might be used and what is it really. We're talking about selling, we're talking about maximizing your investment. So that's really just the right side of this, but there's a lot of considerations along the way, and there's a lot of ways you can kind of optimize that process so you can get to the selling part a lot faster. All right, B2B selling, let's dive into it. So benefits of selling of 3D and B2B. A lot of you probably already know this. If you're already designing in 3D, which I think many of the people on here are, faster time to market. It's a lot easier to iterate on 3D files than it is on 2D or not even 2D, really samples, actual physical samples. So having a digital twin allows you to get to market a lot faster. This is the big one. 3D is unaffected by supply chain disruptions. We heard this from all sorts of brands over the last 2 years. Those that were prepared didn't have as tough of a time. I mean, everyone's had a tough time, but didn't have as tough of a time when COVID hit and supply chains got totally rocked. And now we've got all sorts of crazy things happening in the world. So having a strong 3D process helps protect you or insulate you from those supply chain disruptions. You've got a reduction in prototypes, which is obviously great for sustainability. It's great for reducing costs. It allows buyers to examine product details closer up. So then this is opposed to 2D imagery. You're able to actually zoom in on the details, see the texture, see the material, understand how the whole garment comes together. That's really good for that. And then you're getting higher levels of product engagement when you are leveraging 3D. People are going to spend some more time with it. So some B2B selling considerations. It's okay to use 2D imagery alongside 3D. In fact, we oftentimes recommend it. Sometimes you don't have it. Sometimes it's great to just use a 3D model and you can replace that, but it's okay. I make this specific call out because sometimes people silo them in their minds, like put them together. Absolutely. E-commerce, put them together. B2B, put them together. It's totally fine to have 2D imagery alongside 3D. It's not one or the other. Ultimately, we might get there as rendering capabilities continue to improve and improve. You might just have the 3D model, but today, use both. Something else to note on B2B selling is like context is really important. We're not sitting here saying you need to use 3D for absolutely everything. You should 100% of the time be using 3D. You got to consider the context. Sometimes when you're meeting with a buyer, they've got super limited time and you have a huge number of styles and colorways to show this person. And so the feasibility, you might have, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 images for a product. They might look at 2. So to take the time and like actually engage with 3D, it may not happen. And we've seen instances where that isn't the case. That's okay. You can use 3D as a follow-up. You can send them emails with links to some of their favorite models. You can use it in some of the like showrooms and other tools that I'm going to show you in a little bit. But just consider the context, because we've seen people like shy away because they're like, oh, it didn't work. Like the buyers didn't have enough time to engage with it. It's like, well, maybe that wasn't the right use case for deploying the technology. So something else to consider. And then the other consideration, and this is really when I'm going to show you some of the different platforms where you can leverage 3D today in B2B selling. You want to verify what automated means. Automation is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Optimization is a term that gets thrown around a lot. It behooves you to dig into what does that mean? Ask some more questions. Are you going to be manually adjusting these files? Does automated just mean that you're going to take care of everything? So I'm going to send you all my Clo files or all my browser files or Keyshot files. You're going to export it, do whatever else that needs to be done and handle it for me. And maybe that's fine, but there's a hidden cost there. And there's also an enormous amount of time that gets eaten up, which is very valuable in this industry or any industry. But I know that many of you are under the gun in fashion and trying to get these products out. And so when you have to wait weeks to manipulate files that you already spent weeks building, that really becomes a problem. So verify with all the vendors that you're talking about, what does automated mean? What's the maximum file size that you expect? What are the specifications of the file that you expect me to provide you? What are the limitations of your platform? How are you rendering? Like, you don't need to get into all of it, and there's people that can help you, but it's certainly worth asking the questions. Do not just take people at their face value for, we support 3D. Some of the places to sell in 3D. And so these are the ones that I see come up most commonly. We work with all of them, but Detail, if you're not familiar with Detail and Pixel Pool, they provide some great solutions for digital showrooms. And what I mean by digital showrooms is like an actual retail store, like a retail environment. They also do some assortment planning and some very cool tools around that. And they support 3D. New Order has added a 3D viewer. They support 3D files. The call out being the files all need to be under 40 megabytes, which is pretty much a problem for anyone using ClowShot, your KeyShot, Clo, Moto, Browseware. All those files are going to come out at usually 100 megs plus, if not 500, 700 megabytes. But they do support 3D, and there are multiple ways to do it using iframe, things like that. I can get into that a little bit more. But New Order is a wholesale platform. So for those of you who don't know, New Order is one of the biggest wholesale platforms out there. It's the platform that Nordstrom requires that all of their vendors use. VibeIQ. VibeIQ is on the visual line planning side, but they also work on the retail. They've got an amazing Unreal showroom that allows you to really design your retail store super quickly, and it looks really realistic. I'm going to show you a bit about that. That's super cool. Hatch. Hatch is an actual like digital showroom. So this is like actually physically on premise. They also have some digital versions. We're a startup within PVH that is now spun out and serving other brands like Havaianas. Very cool stuff. Definitely worth checking them out. Jor, competitor to New Order. We have a direct integration there. Jor is an amazing wholesale platform, allows buyers to browse through your entire catalog, look at images, see all the detail. It's got all sorts of connections, making sure you've got all the data you want in there, and they natively support 3D with an integration with us. And then finally, Beyond XR, which has some awesome showroom capabilities and offers a variety of ways to sell in 3D in a B2B and even B2C context. Okay, so I'm going to try and I'm going to talk over some of these things as we're going, because I've got a number of videos here because I just think visual is a lot better for this. So this is Jor. This is what the platform looks like if you haven't seen it. Right here, you see you've got an integrated 3D model. It's the first image that comes up. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the eComm section of things. But you can see they've also got 2D images in there. They've also got photos that are there. So again, you don't have to replace. All the models in here are ready to go for augmented reality. It's a pretty fun feature. It's a cool feature. We get a lot of great feedback on that. So with Jor, the way the connection works, if you were to use Ventana, for instance, basically, and the way that you're going to use connections for most people, you've got your style number that's on Ventana that's been uploaded through a CSV file, or that's been pulled from your PLM or PIM or wherever else you've got that data stored. You've got it on Jor. API associates them, boom, a 3D model is automatically delivered. So it's a fully automated process. Basically, you just have your data on one side, you've got your data on the other, and the connection pulls the data in. All right. So now we'll take a look at VibeIQ. So this is that virtual retail store that I was talking about. So you can see here, they're moving a rug around, they're moving some of the furniture around, like, and then you look at the quality of the renderings here, and it's pretty amazing. They're using Unreal Engine to power this whole thing. So it's got the latest and greatest. And then you can actually view optimized 3D models directly within VibeIQ. Again, they're a partner that's got an integration, so the process can be fully automated. Same thing as Jor. You've got data on Vibe, you've got data on Ventana. They automatically connect and talk to each other. The other thing I'd recommend, I know it's not part of the B2B side of things, but we're seeing a lot of clients look at Vibe on their visual line planning, some very cool tools. If you all have looked at Miro or Mural, they have that, but targeted for the fashion industry. So they understand kind of what you're doing. I would definitely recommend taking a look at them. They overcome a lot of the limitations that people complain about with Miro and Mural. Great tools, but sometimes doesn't do everything that designers want it to do. Hatch. So this is a video of 3D on Hatch, our integration with Hatch. Again, it's kind of a similar sort of idea to Jour, but this is really often leveraged for in-person meetings. They've got hardware that goes along with this. It's super cool. If you haven't checked out Hatch, I would take a look at it. If you're looking at building out a digital showroom that's physical, Hatch has some really great tools for doing that and can kind of handle it end to end with you. And they also have Stitch, which is a part of, they've now combined into an organization which can help you in scaling up your 3D process, particularly if you're browseware users. So beyond XR. So get out of that. Oh, share the wrong screen. Here we go. All right. So this is what, you know, a room in Beyond XR might look like. This is web-based, it's super light. If any of you have looked at like Decentraland or anything like that, it's a million times faster than that. You may not have the same level of interactivity, but they do a great job. They've grown enormously fast. And so what's cool about this is that you've got this web-based showroom that you can access. Here I can see like images of the products that are hanging up on the walls. But I can also click on this little 3D icon. And with the 3D icon, I can load a super light model that I'm then able to interact with. So I can zoom in on the model, I can check it out, I can go into full screen mode if I want to do that. Oh, maybe not on this one. You can interact with the model, you can view the model in augmented reality. And that's like an additional layer. And so I think this is one of the better ways of implementing 3D right now. There's some cool things that are being done with like VR headsets. And like Virtual Retail is a company that does a lot of cool stuff in VR. There's someone you might want to take a look at. But what's nice about this is it's super accessible. Not everyone has a VR headset. It's got that nice balance of, it was 3D renderings that generated this image, but it's light, it's 2D, and then you overlay that interactive 3D on top of it. I think it's a really great way to start introducing some of your buyers to the concept of leveraging 3D in making buying decisions. Cool. And then also within Beyond XR, and what's cool about them is they have like the showroom side of things, but they also have web-based that isn't showroom, is that they've got a few different options for the right type of buyer, the exact environment that you're looking for. This here is showing the Ventana Flow plugin, uploading a file, optimizing it, and then it's going to pull it in directly into Beyond XR. So once you're in Beyond XR, if you've got your files on Ventana, you've got your data in Beyond XR, here you go, you've got your images, and then you also have your 3D asset that exists there out of the box. So Beyond XR, if you haven't spoken with them, speak with them. Mark and Noam are great guys. They're building really cool tools. And I know that they've been growing their customer base in the fashion industry quickly. They started out in beauty, and now you'll see them in all the PI apparels and stuff like that. Cool. The last thing that I'm going to talk about on the B2B selling side of things is an option that we offer within Ventana. And this is, we call it Showrooms. It's really kind of more of a line sheet tool, but it's a really easy way to share 3D with some of your buyers, maybe after a meeting. So, or in advance of a meeting of like, hey, here's a sneak peek at some of the stuff that we're doing. So the way that that works is you've got your 3D models that are on Ventana. They've been connected through the Clo plugin or the Browseware plugin or exported from Keyshot, whatever it is. If I click edit here, I can see a bunch of models. I can search for them. I can add them quick to my showroom. And then I click the share button, copies a link. And now I have multiple 3D objects on a page that I can interact with. I can pull up into full screen mode, zoom in, check out some of the details if I want to do that, of the fabrics, viewed them all in augmented reality. If you've got hotspots that are calling out data about the product, maybe you've got a more technical product, you can do that. But it's just a way to view all of them in a single page. And then we'll pull any metadata that you have associated with these. So it's a really quick and easy way to like start sharing some designs in 3D. It could be internally, or it could be from a B2B buyer perspective. All right, so let's talk about 3D on e-commerce. So what are some of the benefits of 3D on e-commerce? Up to 200% increase in conversions. Sometimes that's higher. Sometimes that's like a lot higher. Like with furniture brands that have a really good AR stack. So meaning that they can, all of their pieces of furniture are ready to go in augmented reality and things work seamlessly. They're seeing 400% conversion rate. Sometimes like I've heard 900% because people can actually see the size of it. Humans are notoriously terrible at understanding size of things when you just write out dimensions. So augmented reality is a really powerful tool for that. People are seeing a reduction in returns because they're getting a better understanding of the product. We're seeing customers like Diesel that have had average transaction value increased by 70% by leveraging 3D. So sometimes it may not be conversion rate, and it might not be return, but it might drive up the total order value because you've got those higher engagement rates. The other reason that we're seeing people do it is they just want to position themselves as a tech-forward brand. That may not always be the best justification for the e-commerce team, but from a marketing or branding perspective, you might want to give a different experience than what consumers are used to. If we look at e-commerce, it's evolved, but not a ton. It's mostly you still have images, and now we've added some videos, and maybe someone's added 360 video, which is a bunch of images stitched together that are basically like a turntable of a product. So we're kind of due for an overhaul, and I think augmented reality and 3D are the future of that. So something to consider when we're looking at e-commerce: speed matters a lot. A 1 second delay in load time can equal an 11% loss in page views. That is massive. And when we're talking about 3D files, we're talking about seconds. Like a fast loading 3D file is maybe 2 to 3 seconds it takes. If you're using just the original Clo or Browseware design file, good luck. You're looking at 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds to get files loaded for consumers. So just taking your models, dropping them onto Sketchfab, dropping them onto somewhere else without optimizing them is going to be, it's an exercise in futility. I brought it up earlier. You have to make sure that this stuff loads fast or it isn't even worth trying. So let's talk about some best practices for 3D on eComm. People kind of want to know, like, what are the specifications? What should I be looking for? What does success look like? You know, we used to ask brands, what do you think it should be? And the answer is they don't know. Not enough people have tested. So this is kind of our best practices after talking to all the brands who are deploying this on the web. 2K textures are usually really good. Sometimes you might need to upgrade to a 4K texture on the asset. Avoid it if you can. It's going to bloat file size a little bit. If you can do 2K, that's a lot better. It's also better for the video memory. So we usually recommend 2K textures. For Browseware assets, you're going to want to use KTX texture compression. So this is one of the things I mentioned earlier about performance. KTX textures basically are a lot more efficient on the GPU of devices, and that matters for mobile. So sometimes an asset will look right on your desktop, but it won't look right on mobile. And the reason is you are running out of video memory, GPU memory, on your mobile device. Browseware can be sometimes inefficient with the way that it exports textures. Clo can too, but Browseware sometimes is a little bit worse. KTX texture compression is just a very efficient format for memory. So it will eat up far, far less, like 80% less memory than a JPEG would if you were using your JPEG textures on a 3D model. Some of this might go over your heads. If you've got 3D designers that want to talk about this a little bit more, you've got some more questions, happy to talk about that later. People ask about the file size. Under 10 megabytes is ideal. Poly count, not quite as important. Honestly, most devices will support about 1 million polys. The issue is 1 million polys equals a lot of file size, so that's problematic. So we recommend you stay under 200,000. For most Clo and Browseware assets, you should be able to get less. You can with Keyshot and things like that too. There are just some other considerations for usually files that are going into Keyshot have been somewhere else before. So it's okay if your poly count's a little bit higher. You want to keep it low, but it's not the end all be all. Like, hey, if this isn't 100,000 polys, it's not going to work. That's just not true. The other thing that I want to bring up is you want to make sure you're connecting with your ads team. And the reason that this is really important is that companies like Google's come out, they're all in on AR. They're all in on 3D. And they're starting to kind of quietly launch programs where they're going to be indexing 3D assets. And there's metadata that needs to be associated with that. But in order to associate the correct metadata, you need to have the IDs that you've got on Google. So connect with those teams, make sure that they're aware of what the other one's doing, because they might have some data that you need to maximize the effectiveness of this. Because obviously, if you've got organic traffic driving to 3D on eComm, you're going to get higher usage rates. You're going to see better performance. Some other best practices when we're looking at using 3D on eComm, people got to find it. So that's something that we've seen call out. Like people go to all this work to create the 3D model. They get the eComm team on board. They're ready to deploy it. And then they're like, hey, it's live. And we go and take a look and we're like, where is it? And it's maybe the 5th image in a carousel, or it's a button that's a little bit small and maybe it doesn't scale properly for desktop versus mobile. Try and make it prominent. If you want to test it, if you want to see the effectiveness of it, you need to make sure that your users can find it. And it sounds kind of obvious, but it hasn't been. So I highly recommend that you've got an AR button that's really prominent. You can say, click here for AR. You can design your own logo. It can be whatever you want. It can absolutely be on brand and with the theme, or a 3D button, but you want to let people know. Because the other thing we'll see sometimes is that there won't actually be an icon at all. So they might be within the carousel, but there won't actually be an icon that they can click on to understand this. So I also recommend making 3D the first image in your carousel or page. If you want to test it out, you can always move it down, but this will let you know how it'll drive higher usage, and it will let you know, is it working for us? Is it not working for us? What do we need to tweak? But it's really hard to test something when you kind of bury it in the page. And then the other thing that I just want to note as we're talking about 3D is I want to talk about configurators briefly. It's something that we get questions about all the time. It's something that people are obviously very interested in. We do offer configurators. Internally, we try and build our configurators in a way that are scalable. What you need to understand and what your eComm teams need to understand about configurators is that the way you design today is probably not compatible with configurators. To build like a true configurator where you're like, we want to swap this top stitching, we want to swap out all the different materials on the Nike swoosh and on this part of it, you can do it and it's being done, but it's a manual process. So it's going to be more expensive and it's going to be more time consuming, and it's probably not going to just leverage your existing Clo and Browseware files that you have today. We have a way of doing that I'd be happy to show and walk through, where basically all the models are separate. But for a lot of the configuration that people ask for today, people are like, we offer configurators, we're automatic. Dive into it. And this isn't me trying to disparage competition at all. I'm just saying you need to dive into it because it's going to be a lot more manual process than you're aware of. So when it comes to adding 3D on e-commerce, how do you do it? And there's really two different ways to go about it. The first way that you can do it, which is probably the most common way and the way that most of the tests start out, is by an iframe. So an iframe is the embed code that you'd see on a YouTube video, you'd see anywhere else. It's super easy for the IT team to implement. You can just call it via the API. It's super low maintenance because it's pulling obviously the latest version, because it's actually, the models would be hosted on Ventana, for example, or Sketchfab, or wherever else that you might be using it. But it's just going to pull whatever the latest viewer they have from there. So there's not really any updates that are required about it. The downside is that you have less control because you're just pulling the iframe. And the other downside is that it's not served from your CDN. So obviously we make every effort to try and make sure this is loading as fast as possible, but your e-commerce teams are working really hard to make sure that page is optimized. They want that thing to load as fast as it possibly can. So they're adjusting images to do that. They're compressing images. They're doing all sorts of things, configuring the CDN based on regions. And are you in Europe? Are you in the US? Where is this content being pulled from? So not having the ability to do that might be a turnoff for them. And so that's why we're going to get into the JavaScript component. So the JavaScript component is basically the web viewer that can be installed directly on the eComm page. So there is no 3D model associated with it natively. It gives you full control. You can do a little bit more customization, but the massive benefit of it really is that you can pull the files from your own CDN. You can pull them from, let's say you're using Adobe Experience Cloud or Adobe Experience Manager. You can load the models directly from there versus an external source like Ventana. The cons are it's going to be a little bit more work for you to implement. It's going to require some manual work to update, and it's just a little bit more technical. It's not difficult. Really, any IT team is up to the task. We're always happy to help clients do it, but those are kind of the two differences. So when you're thinking through it, of how might we implement 3D in e-commerce, you're going to either probably use an iframe or you're going to use a JavaScript component. And again, there's more information on all this stuff on our resources page for at least how we handle it personally. So let's take a look at a few e-commerce examples. First, let's take a look at Diesel. So we're super proud to be working with Diesel. They recently launched their entire Pride collection with 3D. And you can see right at the top, view an AR, view an AR, view an AR. So they've made it prominently. It was really prominently displayed on the site. And that was a learning from a test that they had run previously. So let's take a look at one of these assets. So we've got the 3D model right here on the left, on the right-hand side. There's 2D imagery that's rotating out. Again, I'm just highlighting, it's not one or the other. Sometimes e-com teams freak out. It's both. So you can see right here, we've got 2D, we've got 3D, and you've got this interactive model that loads really quickly. You can dive into it. You can see more detail. Like you can see just how clear that is. You can blow it up to full screen. And then if anyone wants to see it in AR, they scan the QR code, or if you're already on a mobile device, View and AR will directly take you to the augmented reality version of the product. So a very cool implementation by Diesel, but it's not just major brands doing it. This is a smaller brand that we work with, Peak. They have this live on their eComm site right now. It's the third carousel image. The recommendation on this is that they'd have a better call out, but you have this super fast loading 3D model that again lives alongside their 2D. So to implement 3D, you can have a totally separate section, a separate button, kind of like what Diesel did. You can put it into carousels. If you're going to put it into carousels, it's highly recommended you have a call out so you can actually see how this is being done. And everyone's got their own reasons for how they're doing it. I'm just providing best practices that we've seen that has driven the most traffic, the highest conversion rates, the highest level of engagement. And to do that, you really need to call out where 3D is going to live on your e-commerce site. So those are just a couple examples to kind of get you started. All right. Metaverse and NFTs, everybody's favorite or least favorite topic. And I am going to try and give you the most honest assessment that I can about this topic. We get asked about it on a daily basis. A lot of people are super interested. There's an enormous amount of noise and an enormous amount of hype. And so let me talk to you about what's possible and what's not possible. All right. And this is actually going to be a pretty short slide presentation here because I've got a lot to say, but there's not a lot to show because the metaverse is early. The metaverse is early. The metaverse is undefined. And frankly, everyone is trying to jump on the bandwagon, either for investment purposes or for hype purposes, to talk about how they're a metaverse ready company. We're doing things. We absolutely think there are possibilities for the metaverse and ways that products can be sold in a fully digital fashion. But the reality is the metaverse didn't happen overnight. There isn't something, the metaverse didn't just turn on once Meta said, our name is now Meta, it is no longer Facebook. The metaverse today is really a lot of technologies that have already existed. Fortnite has been around for years. Now Fortnite is lumped into the metaverse. That's because the metaverse is kind of this new topic that came out, but Fortnite already existed. Roblox already existed. The reality is, for anything that actually has scale, that's where you're going to want to focus. You might hear about Sandbox Metaverse. You might hear about Decentraland. We've had customers that are like, I want to get my files into Decentraland. Decentraland currently has 998 daily active users. Less traffic than every single person on here's e-commerce size has. There are not a lot of people that are there. The performance is really not there. And then the quality of models that can be delivered there is usually relatively low. There's some stuff that can look okay. I'm not trying to knock them. I'm not trying to knock anyone with this. I'm just trying to give a realistic assessment of where this stuff is today. There aren't a lot of your customers that exist in the metaverse. And the other thing is, metaverses, if you want to call them that, are not really interoperable. So when you pick it, you're not like, we're getting ready for the metaverse. In reality, you're getting ready for a specific channel in the same way you would for, probably even more specifically than anything else. Because if you look at, like, we're going to pull all our 3D assets into Fortnite. Epic Games is doing an amazing job of trying to make this more accessible. They're starting to build tools that are going to allow brands to skin avatars that are going to be sold in Fortnite. The reality is there's going to probably have to be some stylization there that happens. They're not just going to take the way that the garment that you're showing your buyer, the garment that you're showing your e-commerce customer is probably going to look a little bit different in Fortnite. But Epic is working on tools to make that happen. Roblox is working on tools to make that happen. They want your content there. And if I were going to put my content there, or if I was going to put my content in the metaverse, that's where I would focus. So I guess what I have to say is that things are super, super early. Roblox and Fortnite are probably the areas that you actually want to be in. That's where users are. That's where things are actually being monetized. Again, it's going to be some effort. It's nothing's at the point of automation yet. But that's where you're going to want to spend your time. Scale still matters to be effective. That has to go back with what I was saying about Decentraland or Sandbox. There's just not a lot of users there on a daily basis. And so it's a lot of effort for honestly not a huge return at this point in time. Video games are basically kind of the metaverse now. So I think that's actually going to be an area of growth that happens faster, is what people have just considered traditional video games, where you're interacting with other players or you're buying unlocks for avatars, skinning cars, whatever it is, whatever collaborations are going to come up. We've already seen it happen with like Pokemon Go has done a good job of this. They've done stuff with like Gucci and North Face, and it was super successful. And they ended up selling physical product, not just NFTs, but they sold physical product as a result of the collaboration. And they had branded product that worked with the collaboration. And I still think that's the right mindset today. So I also think we're going to see an uptick towards like 3D ads existing. Right now, there are ads in video games, but they're frankly mostly 2D. It's like like a billboard, like Grand Theft Auto, you're driving in a city or something like that. You might see a Coca-Cola billboard that's ad sponsored and is a programmatic ad, or you might see a video, like a video in Times Square, if that's part of the game, for instance. I think we're going to start seeing 3D assets make their way into video games and be more accessible. My final note about the metaverse content: the file size requirements are really, really tiny. They're tiny to the point where if you're doing it manually, if you're doing it automatically, you're losing quality. It's impossible not to lose quality at a file size that's required for this. So it can be okay, but what you're going to get is a stripped down version, a dumbed down version of your product. And so you need to know that going into it, and you need to be okay with it. If the expectation from executives who might see this hype and might be asking you questions and might want to get involved in it is that it's going to look the same, it's not going to. So you should know that and be ready to answer that question. All right. So final thing, NFTs. I'm not going to say a lot about whether or not they're valuable today. They're things that brands might be looking into. Absolutely more than welcome to. What I'm just going to show you today is how you can easily take an asset that lives on Ventana. It could be any asset, but take an asset and create an NFT on it on OpenSea, which is the biggest NFT platform. Alrighty. So one of the first things that you are going to need to do to create an account on OpenSea, you need to have a crypto wallet. There's a couple options out there. The one that everyone seems to be using is a wallet called MetaMask. You don't actually have to have money in there, but you do have to create the account. The way that I found, I've got a Chrome extension, so usually I have to have an extension that's downloaded to be a part of it. The way that I found was the fastest was actually to use my mobile device. So download OpenSea on your iOS device, download MetaMask, and it makes it easier to link them up. So that's step one that you're going to have to do. But then let's look at actually like creating an NFT. So to create a new item, all you really need to do is drag and drop a 3D model into here. Now, the issue is it's a 3D web viewer. There isn't anything, it's getting minted on the blockchain for whatever that's worth. But the reality is it's just displaying a GLB file, and it's just displaying a JPEG file. So that's why you see so much plagiarism, is because there are formats that are open that people can take stuff from. So it's not like this is an encrypted file that gets displayed on your device. It's actually just a GLB file. So when you're creating an NFT, though, things that you're going to want to consider are, because it's being minted on the blockchain, which essentially means that the file is being distributed across the blockchain. So imagine breaking it up into a bunch of bytes and storing it all throughout the decentralized devices. The larger the file, the longer it's going to take, the more of a pain in the ass it's going to be. Pardon my French. And then the other issue is that it's going to slow down load time. So in the same way that it slows down load time for e-commerce, it's going to slow down load times here. So let me jump over to the Ventana platform. All right. So here I've got this, Ventana hoodie that we created. So if I'm here, all I'm going to do, come here, download my GLB file. That's what everyone's going to want for NFTs. I've got it right here. All I have to do is drag and drop that file directly into there. We'll call it Ventana hoodie. You could add a link back to your site. Let's say you were selling this. There's a product detail page. You could add descriptions. Here's the collection. You set up different collections on NFT or on OpenSea. You only can have a certain number of collections. It's kind of just a group of assets like you would when people talk about drops. It's collections the same way you have collections in fashion. And then you can choose what blockchain you want it to be minted on. I'm going to leave it on Ethereum. I don't have a preference. Ethereum's the default for a reason. But if you wanted to do something different, you could do that. And then you simply click create and you have a 3D NFT. And it's as simple as that. So I'm going to jump ahead to the example that I already had because I created this earlier. I'm not going to wait for it to be minted. and you have a 3D asset that loads quickly because it's been optimized, and now that's ready to be an NFT. So it really is that simple. If your company wants to get in NFTs, if you want to try it, basically upload the asset to Ventana, we'll convert it to a GLB, we'll optimize it, you download it, and you upload it to the NFT platform, and you click create, and they'll be minted on the blockchain and ready to go. And so with that, that was my final slide. So I will leave it open for any questions.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Couple questions that have come in, and feel free to add some more down the Q&A section, but we will go through these in order. So a couple questions have come in. One was on the Peak site that you were showing. The second one, it was the same question, came in when you were just showing that Ventana sweatshirt. And it was just around color matching. It looked like there were some colors that, you know, weren't perfectly Ventana blue, for example. What could be driving that? And do you have any detail to share?
So in the so on OpenSea, for instance, that's not our viewer. You're using a different viewer, so it's not going to match because they've got different lighting that's set up into that. And that's a 3D model, is that it can be lit in all different environments. So you need to make sure that that's dialed in across everywhere. On the Peak site, it's probably just a matter of lighting settings that need to be adjusted to get it done correctly. Sometimes you might struggle to match a little bit of like what you're doing in a photo studio to what you're doing in 3D, and that's the challenge, is that lighting is going to be different oftentimes. So that's one of those things in the planning process of getting that lined up, because one of the things that you can do on e-commerce is you can have a custom, it's called HDRI map. And what it really means is it's the environment map of the room. So think about when you've got a product photo shoot, you've got lights all over the place, but you've got a very specific lighting setup that is consistent every single time. And so if you don't have that same 3D version of the lighting setup, your model is going to look different. So without uploading a custom HDRI map, that can be one of the issues that you would run into with matching.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Next question. You went through a couple different applications of 3D. I think we made it pretty clear that NFTs and Metaverse probably aren't the best starting point for brands. But the question is, you know, what do we most commonly see as the starting point when you have successful movement, you know, using 3D for commercial applications? Is it internal line reviews? Is it B2B? Is it eComm? Like, what is the safest and most common starting point?
So I'd say we've been seeing clients move further and further upstream. So, you know, when we first started doing this, our focus was on sell in 3D. And what we're finding more of is that actually the process is going to start a lot earlier, when at least in relation to how they're leveraging our platform for optimization and viewing. Not having optimized models in your internal review processes is going to slow everything down enormously, because basically you've got a designer who's designing in Illustrator, then you've got a 3D designer. That 3D designer is trying to communicate to the 2D designer. They can't, because they just have to send screenshots or renders, which take a long time. And then they're marking that up. So they're not communicating in the same medium. By having a 3D model that's optimized, they can share. That process is going to go a lot faster and get you closer to the selling step. From the selling side of things, the number one application is B2B selling for sure. 100%. It's definitely B2B. And we're seeing a big uptick in that. We're seeing a lot of interest in digital showrooms. We're seeing a huge interest in visual line planning. That's gone way up. 3D and visual line planning this year. I don't know, almost every single client is talking about it. So it's usually B2B, and the final step is e-commerce. And I see kind of that next question come in. Are you seeing 3D model advertising via social media networks? Yes, is the answer to that question. And we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think that that's actually going to start happening potentially before eComm. eComm teams can sometimes be hesitant. Also, all your eComm teams are absolutely slammed because many of you were selling in brick and mortar, and now you're not as much, or you're selling your eComm traffic's gone through the roof. eComm teams haven't expanded enough to keep up with it. So 3D is on the back burner for many of them. They might want to try it, but it might be on the back burner, just putting out other fires. With ads and social media, both Meta and Snapchat and Google are pushing hard to get into advertising in 3D and AR. I don't have the quote in front of me. Maybe I do. Give me 1 second. I might have it in a different presentation that I have up. Let me see if I've got it, because I think it's pretty telling from the Google side of things, how they are looking at 3D advertising. So yeah, the president of Google Commerce said, "We believe AR will become the next permanent staple in how shoppers interact with brands and products digitally. We are bringing this to Google Search. If you have 3D models of the products you sell, Google can now surface them." So the biggest ad network in the world is heavily focused on 3D. We have integrations there to both Meta, Snapchat, and Google. The tightest are with Meta and Google. We're working closer with Snapchat. So I think it's an excellent place to start because it's also a lot easier to A/B test. So 3D ads are coming. I think it's going to be a big deal.
Very good. Timely question on this one. So you talked about the Google 3D indexing and the moves that they're making in search. The question is, where can those specifications be found, and is it publicly available today?
It is. So Google not publicly available. They're looking for partners. We have early access to it. So if that's something that you're interested, reach out. We can have a conversation about that and run it by them. Same with Meta. So a lot of this stuff is kind of in beta. Instagram Shops, I will say, which isn't quite as much advertising. It is, but it isn't. Instagram Shops is live today. We have an integration. You can publish all your 3D assets directly to Instagram Shops through our integration with Ventana. So that's out of the box. Yeah, did I answer the question? I feel like I just got said. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. And if there's a follow-up question, feel free to drop that into the Q&A and we'll pick that back up.
Oh, the specifications. Specifications, I'll add it as an appendix slide to this. We've got all that documented of what those specs are for those various platforms. So I'll add, when Richard sends out the presentation, we'll have that included as a slide.
All right, we talked a lot about metrics. Two of the ones that came up on the slide were 200% increase in conversion rate, 40% reduction in return rate. And then I believe you gave some client examples of what we're seeing in the real world. The question is, where's that data coming from? Can you share any details? Is it just industry standard, or is it from real application?
Real application. Those numbers come from Shopify. They're often cited. Shopify's added 3D capabilities. We have an integration directly with Shopify apps. So Shopify is where 200% and 40% came. Those numbers can vary based on the user, but the reality is the largest e-commerce platform in the world, the largest advertising networks in the world are all in on 3D and AR. So it's only going to get better. Those rates might vary a little bit for you. And there's also variability, like I talked about, like if you've got 3D, if you say we've got 3D and AR and it's the 6th image in your carousel, you don't really, you're not going to get that. You're not going to get a 200% increase in conversion. It's not going to happen. If you've got it higher up, that might happen. So it really depends on, like, there's some variability in terms of how you implement it, but those were numbers that were aggregated across hundreds of brands that had deployed 3D and AR.
All right, thanks, Ben. We have a couple minutes left and a few questions left. This one is around the CMS and the viewer. The question was, can Ventana's CMS configurator embed a color palette or a texture palette directly into the iframe?
So that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is not set up. That is no configurator is set up to do. Let me take 2 seconds to show you that. So if you are in Clo or Browseware, say Browseware, for instance, each colorway is its own 3D model. The way that those files get exported, the materials are not set up for configuration at all. That's why it's a super manual process. So the way that we have gone about that is we created the ability to create a configurator using individual 3D models. So you're not actually configuring. We're adding the functionality to add like a palette, so it looks like you're selecting different colors, but what's actually happening is you're loading different 3D models. And you can see from down here below, I actually am loading, I can associate any sort of jacket. So that's how you can create a configurator that's universally applicable. But just adding palettes, swapping materials on the web, if you're originally designed in Clo or Browseware, it's 100% going to take extra work. Same with Keyshot, same with almost anything. The material setups just usually are not set up for configuration.
All right, we just had a question come in. You mentioned Instagram Shops in one of your prior answers. Can we explain a little bit more about how Instagram's deploying 3D models in the shops today?
Sure, let me just show, I've got a video. So this is Samsung, who we've been working with. You're on Samsung, you go to Samsung shop, you click on a product, this try with camera, boom, it's available within augmented reality. People look at it, examine the model, then you jump back in and you'll be able to get directed to their e-commerce site. So that's what it looks like. Super straightforward integration. Basically, we just need your catalog on Instagram. We'll link that up. And then the product IDs that you have in Facebook, and we link that to the products on Ventana. And then it's an automatic or to publish, and it'll automatically appear.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, the visual is very helpful. We have time for one more question. If we didn't get to your question, we'll follow up with it over email. So thanks for everything that's come in. The last question, really smart one. As you talked about all these different platforms, every single one seemed to have different compatibility, different specs. The question is around universal compatibility and how the industry's moving in a future direction. Do you see some state where everything 3D becomes standard across the board?
So that's what GLTF is supposed to be focused on, is a standard interchange format. The issue is the specifications of how, like, the file sizes and things like that are going to be platform specific, and it's going to depend on application. So like the reason that Meta has such strict requirements, and Snapchat to an extent, is because they're serving up ad units. So that performance is even more important than eComm. It has to load super fast, so they're going to make it small. That is the function of what we do. That is why we came into existence, was this idea is there are going to continue to be disparate requirements across different ecosystems because they just have different needs. So GLTF is the standard format, but the specifications for that file in terms of the max texture resolution, size, poly count, et cetera, are going to vary. I expect them to continue to vary. And you're also going to just kind of you're going to continue to see walled gardens with a lot of this stuff, where Apple's going to want to do its own thing like it does now, and everyone else is going to do something different. So there will be more standardization 100%, but it's going to be a while.
All right, and with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for everybody for spending the time, staying with us till the end, all the great questions that came in. Ben, appreciate it. Thank you very much, and everybody have a good rest of your day.